Good morning, I'm Robert Tan from Markets to Policy. From Manila to the world, we cut through the noise so you can navigate, adapt, and lead. This is Business 360. The Philippine peso remains under pressure. The U.S. Federal Reserve holds interest rates steady. Inflation continues to strain daily budgets as Filipinos adjust to rising prices. We get insights from John Garcia of GCash. Elon Musk faces a high-stakes OpenAI cross-examination.
Ninyong lahat, Martin Romualdez, Lisa Marcos, Bongbong Marcos.
Huwag kang mag-alala, ma'am, sa security ko kasi may kinausap na ako na tao. Sinabi ko sa kanya, kapag pinatay ako, patayin mo si BBM, si Lisa Araneta, at si Martin Romualdez. No joke.
NBI said Duterte violates grave threats and inciting to sedition over alleged death threats versus first couple and Romualdez as House panel prepares impeachment report. The Philippine peso slumps to a new record low against the dollar. It fell to 61.75 as of 9:23 a.m., lower than yesterday's 61.57. In a message sent to Bilyonaryo News channel, Michael Ricafort, chief economist of RCBC, says this is driven by high global crude prices, the naval blockade on Iranian ports under U.S. President Donald Trump, and a more hawkish Federal Reserve amid tensions with Iran. In an interview on BNC's Business Brief, Christina Ulang, research head of First Metro Investment Corporation, says the peso will continue to be weighed down by negative sentiment.
So the confidence is being eroded in terms of investors' preference for emerging markets. Philippines is part of emerging markets. We're small, and there's now going to be a preference by investors into the larger markets, those that have AI stories, defense spending stories like the US, Taiwan, South Korea. They all have AI. We don't have that, and we're suffering from high inflation.
A strong and volatile dollar is dragging down investments in the Philippines. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas said investment weakens when the U.S. dollar both appreciates and becomes volatile as uncertainty rises. The study showed these conditions consistently coincide with lower overall investment, with exchange rate volatility discouraging investors and lenders and having a greater impact than news-based signals. The BSP noted that government spending can help offset these effects, while rising inflation and borrowing costs further weigh on investment activity. After 8 years at the helm, Fed Chief Jerome Powell steps down but plans to stay on inside the U.S. Central Bank. As political pressure builds and rates hold steady, he signals a continuing battle over the Fed's independence. We have Jillian Geronimo for the details.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell ends 8 years leading the U.S. Central Bank with rates on hold, and a plan to stay on as governor to defend its independence from the Trump administration's, quote, battering. Powell said he will remain on the Fed board after his term ends on May 15 and will keep a low profile under successor nominee Kevin Warsh.
There's only ever one chair of the Federal Reserve Board. When Kevin Warsh is confirmed and sworn in, he will be that chair.
He said legal actions, including an effort to remove Governor Lisa Cook and a criminal probe into him, threaten the Fed's credibility and independence. To recall, Powell was previously at the center of a DOJ investigation into cost overruns concerning renovations at Fed buildings. The department dropped its investigation last week. The issue raises concerns about political pressure on the Fed.
I worry that these attacks are battering the institution and putting at risk the thing that really matters to the public, which is the ability to conduct monetary policy without taking into consideration political factors. It is so important for our economy, for the people that we serve, that they can depend over time on a central bank that operates that way, free of political influence. It's part of the absolute foundation of this amazing economy that we have. It's just one of the many reasons why the U.S. economy is the envy of the world.
The Fed held rates steady in a divided decision with 3 dissents and growing inflation worries. Powell said the U.S. economy remains resilient and is expected to grow above 2% this year. He said inflation should ease as the effects of past tariffs fade.
Today, the FOMC decided to leave our policy rate unchanged. We see the current stance of monetary policy as appropriate to promote progress toward our maximum employment and 2% inflation goals. Developments in the Middle East are contributing to a high level of uncertainty about the economic outlook, and we will remain attentive to risks to both sides of our dual mandate.
President Donald Trump criticized Powell and had earlier threatened to fire him if he stays on the board. Powell's separate term on the Fed's 7-member Board of Governors runs through January 2028, near the end of Trump's presidency. He said he'd make a future decision about how long to keep his seat. Jillian Geronimo, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
The Senate panel advances Kevin Warsh to lead the Fed in a sharp party line vote amid political clash over the central bank. The Senate Banking Committee approved his nomination 13-11, with Republicans in favor and Democrats opposed as he moves to replace Jerome Powell. Warsh, a former Fed official and critic of his leadership, blamed the 2022 inflation surge for what he called the central bank's biggest policy mistake in 4 decades. A full Senate vote could come soon, with confirmation possible before Powell's term ends on May 15. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth defends the Iran war in fiery remarks before Congress during a Pentagon budget hearing. This marks his first appearance since the U.S. and Israel launched military action against Iran on February 28. Lawmakers, mostly Democrats, pressed Hegseth on the firing of a senior officer and the direction of the conflict. Hegseth declined to give details, saying the administration removed some generals to bring in new leadership.
What they're doing right now is effectively piracy. It's terrorism. It's threatening international shipping. And our blockade is signaling to the world that we actually control that strait. And I would ask this committee, what would this effort look like if Iran had nuclear weapons? Imagine if not Iran had nuclear capabilities, what they would do to wield over any advantage they have, from proxies to funding international terrorism.
He also fired back at critics rejecting claims that the war is a, quote, quagmire, and accusing lawmakers of undermining the troops. Oil prices surged sharply, shaking energy markets as global supply concerns intensify. Brent crude jumps 5.8% to $110.44 a barrel for July delivery. Intraday trading pushed prices as high as $111.84. The most actively traded Brent contract reached a peak of $119.50 last month since the war with Iran began. June Brent prices briefly topped $120 during Wednesday's session, despite lower trading volume. The government is ramping up spending and interventions to shield consumers from the impact of the Middle East crisis. These include measures in energy, food, and transport sectors. Hannity reports.
The government has already spent more than 41.6 billion pesos to cushion the impact of the Middle East crisis. These funds were used across multiple intervention programs, drawn from the 2026 budget, continuing appropriations, and automatic funds. The government also reported that more than 5,700 overseas Filipino workers and over 1,600 dependents have returned from the Middle East since March as part of ongoing repatriation efforts. To limit the impact of rising fuel costs, authorities said they're focusing on keeping power prices stable. This includes the suspension of the wholesale electricity spot market and implementation of modified pricing. This, they said, helped keep the April power rate increase at just 53 centavos per kilowatt hour, lower than earlier projections that reached as high as 9 pesos. Refunds ordered by the Energy Regulatory Commission, worth over 14 billion pesos, are also being fast-tracked to ease the burden on consumers. On basic goods, the government said there's a commitment to hold prices steady until May 10 for selected products, while the distribution of 20 peso rice has already reached over 450,000 beneficiaries. Logistics support has also been expanded, including toll rebates, discounted rural transport for agri-products, and reduced port and air fees to help keep food supply moving. But Senator Rodante Marcoleta calls for the need for clearer data, particularly on fuel pricing and electricity costs, as he says the public is still not feeling the full impact of these interventions. Responding to this, Senate Pro Tech Committee Chair Win Gatchalian pointed out that the law that seeks to suspend fuel excise tax allows the Department of Energy to require oil companies to disclose data, including cost structures, to ensure there's no profiteering during the crisis. Marcoleta also raised his call for targeted electricity subsidies for low-income households, specifically those who are consuming under 200 kilowatt-hour. For instance, if its monetary value translates to about 2,500 pesos, a family can save the same amount.
Sinasabi ko po, siguradong-sigurado yung pamilya pupunta sa kanya yung subsidy. So wala nang corruption, dire-diretso pa po, wala nang epal.
The Department of Social Welfare and Development says they're open to work with Marcoleta on this, should this legislation move forward. Hannah Tia, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
We take a quick break. Up next, John Garcia, Head of Wealth Management and Market Education at GCash, on inflation as a lifestyle challenge impacting everyday spending. Welcome back. Inflation is no longer just a headline, it's a lifestyle adjustment. Every trip to the grocery, every commute, every bill is forcing Filipinos to make tougher choices. But beyond cutting back, the real question is, are we adapting smartly or just surviving day to day? And joining us this morning is John Garcia, Head of Wealth Management and Market Education at GCash. Good morning, John. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Robert. Nice to be here.
John, when we say inflation, most people think prices are increasing all the time. Now, but what's the more dangerous effect Filipinos are not paying attention to?
Well, they don't notice, but it affects their everyday. Okay, and the thing is, the primary reason for all of these escalated prices that we're experiencing across all sectors, you know, transport, electricity, food, is driven by the oil disruption, the oil supply disruption that we're facing. So they may not notice it, but it's already there. It happens at the little bit and pieces of every daily consumption that they do. For example, I get my morning bread, no, the pandesal, that used to sell for 6 pesos a piece. Now it's 7 pesos, and that's huge.
Yes.
To a normal Filipino, it's just a peso, but it's really, you know, close to 20%.
And if you buy that every day, you know, it compounds.
It compounds. It adds up. And also with the transportation and the electricity too. You know, that's being trending right now. People are talking about it, how expensive electricity is.
With all that happening, John, are Filipino families actually adjusting better today, or are we just getting used to having less?
You know what? The thing is, it's so sad that we have to think about getting used to having less. People really do have to adjust, and the adjustment would come in many forms. So if transportation is expensive, try to find ways to, you know, cut down on traveling. Maybe planning your trips, or even if you have the luxury to work from home, work from home. If there are ways to aggregate activities like carpooling, that's also a possibility. So it's not just really about adjusting. It's trying to keep up, yes, but at the same time, being at you know, on point with your personal finances. So
every crisis that we've gone through, we always hear that the Filipinos are resilient, but nowadays people are kind of getting tired of that word. That how long can we just be saying that we're resilient to all these happening, and what can we do better?
Okay, resiliency at this point is not just limited to Filipinos. This is a global. Situation that we're facing right now. And I guess what I want to say here is that we all should stay cautious. You know, we're experiencing some short-term relief right now, 3 weeks of consecutive, you know, diesel and gas price rollbacks. But these rollbacks are not the turning point. You know, these are short-term reliefs, I would say. the local pump prices are following the mean of Platts in Singapore.
Yes.
So and the MOPS really would have probably a 2-week lag from what really is happening in the global oil market. So the rollback that we're seeing over the last 3 weeks is actually reflecting the slight retracement in the crude prices due to the peace talks at that time. They had the de-escalation. But recently, we've noticed a surge in the crude prices due to the renewed tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. Crude oil is trading anywhere between $115 to $119 per barrel, and that affects us a lot. So what does it mean? We're seeing a price reduction now in oil or in diesel and gasoline, but this is temporary. Because in the next few weeks, we should start feeling the effects of the high crude. Another surge. It's going to happen. It's
temporary lang to.
Temporary. And, even if, for example, the tensions, tomorrow for some miracle is okay, and they open up Strait of Hormuz, those ships that are trapped there will take about 4 weeks to 5 weeks to get here.
Yeah, it won't be overnight. It's going to take some time.
It won't be overnight, and the infrastructure that was destroyed there will take time to rebuild. So this is no longer pricing risk anymore. This is pricing a shock in the supply chain, and a supply chain of one commodity that affects the prices of goods and services across the economy.
Now, looking inward, John, looking at your customer base, you're seeing real user behavior inside GCash. What's changing? Are people saving less, investing less, or borrowing more, or the other way around?
Well, I can only speak for our space in wealth. We're very happy to share that we've seen an increase in the savings rate. So people are saving more. So when I say saving more,
No?
Hopefully not. Of course, they're not forced. Because imagine, it's more difficult for them to save now because the spending is more expensive. But they
when
still
I say
manage.
forced saving is that, since prices are higher now, people are forced savings because they don't want to spend that much on the goods nowadays.
Okay, so now we're talking about two different kinds of goods. You have staples and discretionary.
Yes.
Of course, people will save and not buy the discretionary goods. So maybe they can, not eat out as much.
Lessen on the coffee.
Lessen on the expensive coffee, overpriced coffee. But they still need to buy the staples. So despite the more expensive spending, they still get to save. And we're so happy about that. And we're seeing increase in the number of savers and also increase in the amount that each individual is saving through RG Save. And aside from the increase in saving, we also noticed that our investors, particularly for funds, are intact. So meaning the same number of investors are still there, they're still invested, they keep on investing. Maybe the net value of their investments would be a bit lower because of market conditions, but the point is the activity is still there. So I guess, much of the education and advisory work is really taking effect. People are invested, people are saving. They are preparing for,
the future.
They are not the future, but really how bad this may get.
It may get.
And that goes back to your point earlier on resilience. So resilience comes in many forms, and being financially resilient is one of them.
Now, let's be honest, John. Can the average Filipino really start building wealth in this environment, or is it really about survival?
Well, we all would have different starting points in our financial journey. So for your everyday Filipino, at this point, I think it's really more on survival in the sense that liquidity matters for them, accessibility to funds matter for them, for their emergencies, and also if there are opportunities. So that's why we keep on advising that, they take advantage of the current situation. For example, the BSP announced interest rate hike, right? So that would mean, well, not overnight, but eventually the savings accounts would be paying higher interest rates. So take advantage of this, save up more, build their emergency fund. To those who would want to be investing, would have a little extra, well, there are a lot of safe haven investments also locally available. Like our government-backed securities, RTB 31 is paying 6%. That could be a good start. It's practically risk-free. You know, there's no default risk there.
But it's good to hear you're saying within your environment of GCash, you see a lot of people saving and sticking to their investments. But on a bigger scene, what do you think are the most common financial mistakes people make during high inflation periods and even during a crisis?
Well, I would think, of course, they will try to spend less, and that's not a mistake. But the thing is, the money that you're able to set aside, where do you put that money?
Yes.
So if they don't put it in, in instruments or accounts that would generate returns for them, at least to beat inflation, that's the greatest mistake. So they think they're better off. They think they're setting money aside for the rainy day. But the reality is, if your inflation now stands at 4.1, 4.9%, BSP said that their inflation forecast for the entire year 2026 on average will be 5.1. So you have to be targeting your money to be earning 5.1%. And if they're not, if they put their money in a place where it's not making them 5.1% at least,
they're actually losing money.
They're losing money.
It's being depreciated. Yes,
that's one point for for at least the mindful Filipino, for the frugal Filipino. I'll just share with you an observation. Early April, I went home to the province up north, and I noticed that was the time when the fuel prices are still expensive.
Yes.
They're still expensive now, but they're not as expensive as it were before. And I noticed that the NLEX traffic was so light, and the parking at the gas stations, had a lot of vacant spots. Right. Last week, I also drove up north. And this is after, I think, 2 weeks of consecutive rollbacks. And it's like back to normal again. People are going out again. Maybe those trips, some of those trips would be necessary, but most of them probably not. Because I've seen the volume.
Feeling the traffic again.
I felt the traffic. I saw the parking lots being full again. But, we have to remind them, we are not yet back at pre-war levels. Even with the 3 weeks of consecutive rollback, the fuel prices are still 50% more expensive than how it was before everything happened? And this is, again, a temporary relief. When these, increased crude prices start kicking in, we will see the pump prices go
I guess
back.
some people are saying, life has to move on. They can't just stay in place. So, you have to go to work. You have to, you really have to spend. There's no two ways about it. But you're saying keeping cash, saving cash is not enough.
That's true.
It depreciates. You have to put it where the smart money is. But what we see is many families respond by cutting expenses. But at what point, when you say, the point of being tipid, being thrifty, how does it become more harmful now in terms of their own financial growth?
At this point, I wouldn't say being thrifty or tipid would be harmful in their financial growth. Because any form of spending less would be good for your finances. Again, it's what you do with the money that you save.
Yeah,
that you put aside.
You can't just leave it in cash.
Yeah, you cannot just leave it in cash. You have to be investing it. Look at fixed income. We also have diversified investments through our G funds, wherein investors can look at stable options like, say, money market funds or medium-term bond funds. If the local market is not moving at this point, we can look outwards. And also through that product, investors or GCash users would have access to global markets. Like, say, for example, one particular fund that I want to talk to you about is our Global Infra. And the Global Infra Fund has invested in companies that are into infrastructure. So, and this is a strategic approach from the get-go. Back then, 1 year ago, the story is this fund would be investing in companies that are building infrastructure to support AI, because AI would be growing at that time. Now, the narrative would shift because, for example, there's a lot of infrastructure that's been damaged in the Middle East, and this fund would have exposure to companies that would benefit when the rebuilding starts. So my point is, there are opportunities, they just have to be selective. And what we're trying to do at GCash is to continuously guide our users through our advisory program.
That's good to have a guidance advisory program. But what do you say, what practical move can they do? What would you say to those who still have fear of putting their money in stocks, the market, or any financial instruments. They don't really know how to navigate that, especially now we're in a crisis. They don't know if where they're going to put their money is going to go up, really build their wealth or not. What do you say to them? What kind of, you were mentioning you have advisories, you have maybe mentorship. What do you say to them?
Okay, at this point, we tell them that liquidity matters. So they have to keep their money in assets that are easily accessible because we don't know what their needs are, in the coming months. So we still advise them to put a good portion of it in high-interest savings. There are a lot of high-interest savings through our digital bank partners. There are also time deposits that are short-term. If I was talking about RTBs earlier, these are paying dividends quarterly, but they can also look at treasury bills, which are issued every week. The rates are much higher than inflation. So that's a hedge. That's a hedge against inflation, and it matures every 3 months. So if they would need their money in 3 months' time, they would have access to it. So at this point, it's really liquidity and stability. That's what we're advising them. Now, there are also, for the more sophisticated investors, access to safe haven assets.
Yes.
For example, the peso is weakening, right? Maybe they would want exposure to the US dollar, and that would be easy for them through our G crypto. We have dollar-backed stable coins like USDT. And if they would want to have exposure to gold, which historically in challenging markets like this would really perform well because the value of gold is easily determined.
When you look at gold, the stocks or real gold?
Yeah, so also in that space. So if we have access to digital and tokenized dollars, we also have access to digital gold. So we have gold in G Crypto that will be launching next week. This is powered by XAUT. We also have another gold product, PaxG, which is already live. Some investors would want exposure to gold through the companies, but of course there's that layer of the corporation. It's not like having real direct access to gold, albeit digital. So in this case, because if you buy the gold, say, through our G Crypto, there is really underlying gold that's stored in a vault, right? So it's real exposure to gold.
What is adoption like with your your digital tools within GCash? For those who probably don't know how to invest yet, who want to invest but just use GCash for payments, for sending money, how do you get them into that position wherein, hey, you have savings here in your GCash. We have these financial tools that could actually create more wealth for you in terms of instead of just leaving it in cash. Or do you also have savings part? I've seen different banks in their online platform. You can put some in, let's say, time deposit or savings that can earn a small amount of interest, but better than just keeping it there and it depreciating in the coming days.
Yeah, so we constantly communicate with our clients in-app. So this is already a targeted base, so meaning there are already existing clients, existing GCash users. We push the products to them, say savings. If they already have savings and we see that they have a huge amount of money already in savings, we try to communicate to them investment products. So this happens in many forms. They receive push notifications. They see nudges in the app. We also do emails for them. Now, for the general public, so what we do is we're very active in socials. We have a very healthy G-Invest community on Facebook. So if our viewers are not yet members, I invite them to be. In the G-Invest community, we provide our regular advisory content. So they see, market news, market updates.
Actually, I see that, the G-Invest. But again, for those who are not really that well-versed in that, where does GCash come in? Again, are you seeing yourself now as a financial lifeline for those who really want to save but don't know how, want to invest who don't know how?
So what we're doing at GCash is really providing access to all of these financial products that, before launching all of these things have really become inaccessible or even impossible for most Filipinos. So access, it doesn't stop at access. We need to educate them. We need to continuously guide them. So how we see it is we're here as a co-pilot. We're here to help them, guide them in every step of the way, making sure that they get the help that they need, either in the form of more accessible or more affordable financial products, not only in investments, but also in insurance coverages. I forgot to mention earlier that especially at this point, financial protection is even more important. And of course, the guidance and continuous education. That's what we're that's what we're doing. Hence, we rolled out our new AI Wealth Coach that's in the app because of course all of the programs that we're doing are not available 24/7.
Again, what do you say to those people who still have some fear or don't really know how to use AI?
Well, you just really have to try it out. You'll never know how the benefits and how it would, how powerful the tool is unless you give it a try. And the thing about our AI, it's really designed to be very conversational. It speaks in, speaks the language of the user. So for our users outside Metro Manila, it speaks Cebuano, Hiligaynon. Of course, Tagalog and Taglish. Very soon, we're rolling out the other dialects too. So imagine someone from Pampanga who would, just want to chat with an AI in Kapampangan, and this AI is giving, relevant responses to
and advice
localized to the user. So that's financial inclusion and education at the very best.
Yeah, so because we do really need to, elevate our financial literacy here in the country. It's still a lot to do. But John, if you had to simplify it, what are the 3 habits that define a financially resilient Filipino?
Okay, so yeah, I can break it down into more practical means. So let's start with the tipid. So at every instance that you can save, do so. For example, for our commuters in Metro Manila, they can take advantage of the 50% off discount at the MRT3 while using their GCash. So that's huge already. If they're driving their cars or their motorcycles and there's a way for them to commute, that's also a practical way. Now, financial protection is also important. A lot of Filipino households, families are, just one sickness away from total poverty. And I'm not speaking about, those vulnerable sectors, even some professionals too, because they don't have enough coverage. And there are transactions within the app that gives them access to, say, free health insurance. Like a buy load. When they buy load within GCash, they get access to the free health insurance that gives them coverage, I think, of up to 30,000 pesos. And of course, insurance, for that matter, has also been made more affordable. So financial protection is very important because if you get sick, there has to be a way for you to recuperate lost income while you're down, right? So that's where the tipid and the financial protection comes in. Then the next step would be the saving and growing that saving. So for those who doesn't have savings yet, they should start, setting aside money for their emergencies, their emergency fund. Once they have that in place, any buffer would do. Some people are comfortable with 3 months, 6 months. I would personally want a 1-year buffer if I can afford it, right? Little by little. And you cannot grow wealth you don't have. So without an emergency fund in place and some savings in place, you can't invest. So the investment is, at the tail end. So for those who are, who are more fortunate, we've already discussed the various investment options available for them.
Right now, within the GCash app, are you seeing more new investors looking into the financial instruments that are being provided by GCash? And how easy is for someone who's fairly new, who don't know much, when they go inside the app and learn about how to invest? How easy is that? And what are the requirements?
We're definitely seeing an increase in the interest. New users sign up every day, that's for sure. And what I like most would be not just the interest, but the sustained activity. So people are starting to make their first move, and they're consistent about it, they're habituating. And you're right, probably it's because it's easier, it's more accessible. We've provided access to products that are inaccessible before. Like, for example, stock trading. We have a digital stock trading platform, G-Stocks. Imagine a sari-sari store owner in the province, or maybe just one in the cities around Metro Manila. Don't have to go to an office of a brokerage firm to sign up. Everything is digital.
Yes,
So-
because sometimes the fear is it's too technical, it's hard. You know, when you talk about investing, it's a totally different environment, and that creates fear for some who are not really that well versed in it, and that's why they're especially looking at the market, it's very volatile right now.
That's why we designed the experience different from how the usual
Yes.
online platforms are. Our experience are much simpler, they're easier, they're streamlined. We try to reduce
Laymanize
the steps,
it.
laymanize it. Even the interface is beginner friendly. They don't really have to be experts to know this. But you know, at some point in the journey,
You gotta start.
they would really have to learn.
Yes.
They would really have to have that active pursuit of knowledge for what they're getting into. That's how they gain confidence. Because if they do not understand what they're getting into, they'll never get the confidence. And that's what we try to do in GCash. We continuously educate them. As I've said before, education, financial education remains at the forefront of what we do. And this is across all users. So from financial inclusion to all the way to market education and investment advisory.
Well, I like that mindset that you won't really know what's going to happen unless you try.
Yes.
And just like in sales, or you won't know if somebody's going to buy if you don't ask. It will always be a no if you don't ask. So
Exactly.
it's better to try and figure it out.
Exactly. And of course, when they try, we want them to have a pleasant experience.
Yes.
We want the initial experience to
And
them to be for them to
yes.
be successful. So what we try to do now would be give them the proper guidance. Oh, you're a first-time investor. You shouldn't be buying stocks. You shouldn't be buying those
Yes.
crypto because they're high risk. They would have high returns, but they're very risky.
Yes.
So we would advise the more
Okay.
stable ones. So they make money, basically. At the end of the day, if our clients would make money through the investment products that we give them access to, then we're doing our jobs right.
And John, final quick advice to those who are watching right now. What can they do? How can they access GCash and all these investment platforms within the environment?
Well, at the end of the day, I wouldn't have to share how would they access GCash because I really believe that they use it every day.
Yes.
Right? Like I cannot get out of the house without using GCash at least once a day.
But
What I
look
would
into whatever's in there,
Yeah.
not just payments and sending money.
So GCash is not just your send money, buy load app. It is a financial super app. There's so many things that you can do with it. It can help you with your spending. It can help you protect yourself. It can help you save, build your wealth, and grow it over time. And what we continuously endeavor to do is to provide that guidance for our kababayan. So my message to our kababayans would be, you're not alone in this one. So and you have GCash. Maaasahan nyo kami
Yes.
to be with you. And we won't just give you access to these products and access
Yes.
to these tools, but we will provide
There's help.
the guidance every step of the way.
Okay, on that note, John, thank you very much for joining us this morning, your insights and your advice, and hopefully people will start investing. Try, because you won't know until you try. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert, for having me again.
Okay, we're taking a quick break. Up next, global markets, what's moving and why. This is Business 360. Let's take a look at how global financial markets performed overnight. Wall Street ended mixed as investors weighed rising crude prices, the U.S. Federal Reserve's interest rate decision, and a wave of high-profile earnings released after the closing bell. The Dow Jones dropped almost 0.6%. The S&P 500 is flat with a downward bias, while the Nasdaq is also flat with an upward bias. And let's take a look at how local markets are performing. As of 9:49 this morning, the PSEI is in the red, down almost 0.4%. Value turnover reached almost 1.5 billion pesos. Market breadth is negative with 46 advancers, 52 decliners, and 63 unchanged stocks. Meanwhile, early trade shows SM investments falling almost 2%. Elon Musk clashes with an OpenAI lawyer during a heated cross-examination in a California court hearing over the future of the AI company behind ChatGPT. Musk accused the lawyer of trying to, quote, trick him during questions on his early donations and OpenAI's corporate structure. The case stems from Musk's lawsuit claiming OpenAI abandoned its nonprofit mission, while the company argues he is acting out of bitterness over its success. OpenAI also alleges Musk once pushed for a for-profit structure and even sought to become CEO while he is now building his own AI company, XAI. Musk is expected to return to the stand for further cross-examination on Thursday, April 30 Eastern Time. Alphabet posts surging profits as its AI push and Google Cloud growth drive another quarter of strong earnings. The company earned $62.6 billion in the January to March period, up 81% year-on-year. Revenue rose 22% to $109.9 billion, both beating expectations. Google Cloud revenue soared 63% to $20 billion, while digital ad sales rose 16% for the fourth straight quarter of double-digit growth. The results highlight continued heavy AI investment and expanding growth across Alphabet's core businesses. Meta Platforms posts strong first quarter earnings that top expectations but raises capital spending plans for the year. The company earned over $26 billion, up 61%, while revenue rose 33% to $56.31 billion, both above analyst estimates. Meta also increased its 2026 capital expenditure forecast to $125 billion to $145 billion, citing higher component prices and data center costs. The company flags regulatory and legal risks in the U.S. and EU as it continues heavy spending on artificial intelligence and infrastructure. Prime Energy steps up its search for new gas sources as it reviews a long list of service contracts to boost domestic supply. The company says it is pursuing multiple exploration projects, noting that only about 2 out of 12 drilling wells are successful, making extensive assessment necessary. Malacanang and Prime Energy announced the successful drilling of the Camago 3 well in Palawan, expected to produce up to 60 million standard cubic feet of gas daily. The well marks the second major milestone under the $893 million Malampaya Phase 4 development. The developments aim to extend Malampaya's life by about 6 years, with first gas output from Phase 4 targeted for the fourth quarter. SM Investments Corporation reports a 7% increase in net income to 21.5 billion pesos in the first quarter of the year. Growth is driven by strong performance across its core business segments. Banking remains the largest contributor, followed by property, retail, and portfolio investments. President and CEO Frederick Dibuncio says retail continues to be a key growth driver, with the company focused on meeting consumer needs despite external pressures on spending. SM Retail posts solid growth supported by higher demand in non-food categories, while food and specialty retail delivery steady results. Aboitiz Equity Ventures Incorporated reports net income of 6.3 billion pesos in the first quarter, nearly double from a year ago. Its power segment drives the biggest share of earnings, followed by food and beverage and financial services. Aboitiz Power Corporation contributes 4.4 billion pesos in net income, boosted by higher generation margins and continued capacity expansion. Meanwhile, real estate and infrastructure segments remain in the red as gains are offset by weaker industrial estate contributions and losses from Republic Cement. The Philippines is pushing for a bigger role in the global electric vehicle metal supply chain, leveraging its rich nickel and copper reserves. At a mining conference in Hong Kong, Mike Toledo of Metro Pacific Investments Corporation says the industry is now a key driver of the global energy transition. He adds the country can help stabilize supply chains and attract investments if mineral development is managed responsibly. As demand for electric vehicle materials surges, the Philippines is positioning itself as a strategic player in the shift to clean energy. We'll take a quick break. Up next, the NBI says Sara Duterte may have violated laws on grave threats and inciting to sedition as a House panel prepares its report for a plenary vote on her impeachment case. This is Business 360. Welcome back. The House Justice Committee has formally declared probable cause in the impeachment complaints against Vice President Sara Duterte. Apart from questions on confidential funds, lawmakers also tackled her alleged threat against the First Family during the hearing. Let's take a look at what had transpired in yesterday's proceedings in this report by Isaiah Mirafuentes of Abante.
By a unanimous vote of 53-0, probable cause or sufficient basis has now been formally declared in the complaints against Vice President Sara Duterte.
So ruled. That concludes our voting. And the chair pronounces that the existence of probable cause has been declared with respect to both the Sabalia complaint and the Cabrera complaint. With that, we direct the committee to prepare the necessary committee report.
Prior to this, committee members engaged in lengthy discussions regarding the opening of a sealed box containing Duterte's tax records from the BIR.
Sako po sa kapangyarihan natin, kasama sa mandato natin, flowing from the Constitution itself, to do that. To open the box and examine the contents of the box.
Ang trabaho ng House ay tukuyin lamang ang probable cause kung may usok ba sa likod ng apoy. Ang pagtitimbang ng ebidensya at ang pagbubukas ng mga selyadong dokumento ay mas nararapat na gawin sa Senate sitting as an impeachment court.
Meanwhile, many were surprised by the position of known pro-Duterte Representative Paulo Marcoleta.
So I dare the committee to open the box. At sinabi rin po ni Popoy sa pelikula, I deserve an explanation. I deserve an acceptable reason. Siguraduhin niyo po na kung bubuksan niyo yan, meron po kayong acceptable reason.
This was countered by Akbayan Representative Percy Sendania.
Pero may nabanggit po kasi kanina na Popo at Basha na line po si Representative Marcoleta. Hindi po siya kay Popoy, linawin ko lang po. Ito po ay kay Papa P, kay Piolo Pascual sa pelikulang Starting Over Again. And I hope that as we decide on this matter, this will not lead us to starting over again.
However, after the lengthy discussion, the box remained untouched. By a vote of 38 no, 6 yes, and 0 abstain, the House Committee on Justice did not open the sealed box containing the Vice President's tax records. The hearing also featured a video of VP Sara allegedly making threats against the first couple and former House Speaker Martin Romualdez.
Ninyong lahat, Martin Romualdez, Lisa Marcos, Bongbong Marcos.
Huwag kang mag-alala, ma'am, sa security ko. Kasi may kinausap na ako na tao. Sinabi ko sa kanya, kapag pinatay ako, patayin mo si BBM, si Lisa Araneta, at si Martin Romualdez. No joke.
And this was really not a joke, as according to the National Bureau of Investigation, the Vice President allegedly violated 3 counts of grave threats and 1 count of inciting to sedition.
Kung hindi tama ang ugaling ito para sa second highest official of the land, mas lalong hindi po ito karapat-dapat para sa isang tao na nag-aambisyon na maging highest official of the land.
Some lawmakers maintain that even if it's a conditional threat, it still violates the law.
This is an impeachable offense which violates the Constitution. Thus, it is betrayal of public trust, Thus, it is a high crime, regardless of whether it is a threat, because of the gravity of this act by the Vice President.
Meanwhile, the House Committee on Justice will now prepare its committee report, which will then be submitted to the plenary. After deliberations, all lawmakers will proceed to vote. Isaiah Mirafuentes, Abate.
House Justice Committee Chairperson Jervil Luistro defends the panel's decision not to open the tax records of Vice President Sara Duterte. In a 38-6 vote with no abstentions, the committee rejected the motion to unseal a box containing the income tax returns of Duterte and her husband, Attorney Mans Carpio. Speaking on BNC's On Point, Luistro said there is already sufficient evidence to establish probable cause.
Personally, my position really is not to open. Sabi ko nga kanina, we've gone a long way already in spite of the so many challenges and petitions before the Supreme Court. Let us not take the risk. After all, you are saying that there is enough evidence already to support the existence of probable cause. Since day one, I've been telling this to them, Pinky. We are taking the conservative route. We are taking the safer road. So let us be consistent in as far as the issue of opening the box is concerned. Let us remain conservative. That is my personal position.
Luistro also expressed hope that the lower chamber will be able to convince senator judges to convict Duterte if the case reaches the Senate. Bilyonaryo Han C. brought a lighthearted moment to Angels Walk for Autism 2026 as he joined participants in dancing to the now viral track Hawak Hawak Mong Beat. In a video shared by Senator Risa Ontiveros, C was seen smiling and dancing along with attendees, light stick in hand, as he followed the choreography to the upbeat routine. The annual Angels Walk for Autism advocates for greater inclusion and support for individuals on the autism spectrum. It also serves as a continuing call for government action to pass legislation that will provide long-term institutional support for Filipinos on the spectrum. And that's it for Business 360. I'm Robert Tan. Thank you for joining us. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.